From our 22 News Broadcast Center, this is 22 News in Focus.
Welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Ciara Speller. Over 10 years, the Massachusetts legislature has been considering a law that would authorize medical aid in dying as end-of-life care option. The most recent bill is known as the Massachusetts End-of-Life Options Act, and currently 9 states and Washington, D.C. offer physician-assisted death. Supporters say that it would help a terminally ill patient make an informed decision about how to end their life. But opponents of the measure are concerned about possible abuses of the law, as well as the moral issues surrounding the sanctity of life. 22 News in Focus will also have a separate program with supporters to the proposed law. Joining me now is Andrew Beckwith, president of the Massachusetts Family Institute, representing opposition to the bill. Andrew, thanks for being here with us. I'd first like you to tell me about your organization.
Well, sure. Massachusetts Family Institute is the local associate here in the Commonwealth for Focus on the Family. And we deal with a wide range of issues, including the sanctity of life from conception all the way to natural death. This is one of the first issues that I was involved in when I joined Mass Family Institute in 2012, was the assisted suicide ballot referendum that fortunately was defeated at that time.
And what compelled you to become involved with this issue?
Well, because suicide is not a solution. We should be giving people reasons to live, not treating them like they're a burden on society.
Now tell us, what other organizations or partnerships are involved in opposing this measure, and how are you working together?
Sure. Well, back in 2012, I think, again, when I first got involved, and at that time, we brought together a large group of various organizations, everything from minority faith communities, the disability community, as well as the medical profession. In fact, there was a letter signed by 100 Massachusetts physicians late last year, an open letter in opposition to assisted suicide. There was a recent letter signed by about 80 faith leaders from the minority community. And I really learned a lot working with representatives from the disability community when they told their stories, because they understand that when you do something like pass assisted suicide, what you're saying is that there is a certain minimum threshold for quality of life, and that if someone drops below that arbitrary threshold, that life is no longer worth protecting legally. And they knew that they would be the first ones to suffer from that type of radical change in the medical profession and in our laws.
And the legislature has been reviewing this issue for 10 years now, so why do you think a bill has yet to be passed?
Well, the people of the Commonwealth don't want it. They rejected it in the referendum in 2012. There's been plenty of very powerful testimony against it at legislative hearings every time it's come up. It's a bad idea. So unfortunately, the legislature recognizes that.
Now, I want to ask you, 10 other states and Washington, D.C. have created similar laws. What have you heard from your colleagues in those states about how many patients have ended their lives with medical assistance?
Well, some of the complaints I've heard from a colleague in Washington State, for example, is that it's very hard to get good data on assisted suicide because it's cloaked in sort of a veil of secrecy, and that's intentional. If you look at the legislation here in Massachusetts, one of the provisions that's very concerning is that it would require doctors to essentially falsify death certificates. In other words, they'd be forbidden from putting any mention of the fact that it was suicide or assisted suicide on the death certificate, so that if family members tried to find out after the fact what happened, there'd be no way for them to know. What we have heard in some of the studies coming out of Oregon and Washington State is that when people choose assisted suicide, they do it for reasons that are really more akin to depression. They fear loss of personal autonomy, and they feel like a burden on society.
And so at the beginning of the program, we mentioned that we've also heard from those on the opposite end of this argument. A doctor who shared her personal experience about watching, family members, loved ones suffer from their illnesses. And another doctor who brought up the point of we're living in the era of COVID right now. So concerns with people who are terminally ill also being faced with COVID. What would your response to that be?
Well, the COVID issue really kind of accentuates the fact that if you make putting people to death an option, that's always going to be cheaper. That's always going to be the path taken when you have limited medical resources, which is one of the major concerns at the outset of this pandemic, is that there would not be enough resources for everyone who needed them. And when you fundamentally undermine the medical profession by saying you can put people to death, that puts the weakest and most marginalized amongst us at risk. Those who don't have access to the finances or the other resources to get good health care, they're going to be the ones who bear the brunt of this. What I've heard from people during COVID who have lost elderly loved ones is just the trauma of not being able to be with them during their final days and hours because of all the quarantining.
And then so on the opposite end of those who have been there to watch their family members suffer, until the end, like the other doctor touched on, what would you say to that?
Well, we never really know when the end's going to be. I mean, one of the major problems I hear from doctors on this is that there is at minimum a 30% error rate in diagnosing if someone's terminal or not. For example, when I first went to a legislative hearing on this type of legislation here in Massachusetts, there was a man who testified against it, who said that he had been diagnosed with 6 months or less to live 27 years ago. In fact, Dr. Roger Kliegler, who had filed a lawsuit in Massachusetts to try and get the right to assisted suicide, he was diagnosed with 6 months or less to live, I think maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and he was alive and in court this past January when the court ruled that there was no right to assisted suicide. So I'm glad that he lost the case, but I'm also glad that he was there to hear that years after he was supposed to no longer be with us. And that just proves the point that laws like this that are based on a medical diagnosis of 6 months or less to live, those have a 30% or more error rate. So we'd be cutting people's lives short because we just don't know when they're going to end.
All right, Andrew Beckwith, thank you for joining us, and we'll continue our conversation after the break. You're watching 22 News in Focus.